Good evening, everyone. And we are starting a very important chapter, which is in Isaiah chapter 6. It is a small chapter, but it is critical that we understand the background as well. One of the challenges in studying the book of Isaiah is that it is not lined up in a general chronological fashion. That chapter 1 is really not the beginning of the entire book. And as it moves along, it has some form of a chronology, but it interjects into different parts of the period of Isaiah's ministry. Now, just to recap, Isaiah's ministry spans 4 kings. All right? 4 kings. We have Uzziah, and then we have Jotham, and then we have Ahaz, and then we have Hezekiah. Now, it is very important that we are able to frame each of the chapter in this particular period of time. And for the most part, we have seen in our first 5 chapters that many things have taken place in this period. And most of the time would be after the Assyrian conquest. And so much of it has been discussing Judah and Jerusalem. Now, in chapter 6, we are no longer at that time period. Chapter 6 requires us to reset our minds that it moves to a new destination or new period, which is right here, Uzziah, right? Uzziah. And in order for us to understand this particular book, we need to be very clear of what happened to Uzziah, and then I will unpack the Hebrew. I would leave all the interpretations and whether you agree or disagree. That's not very important. What I need all of us to understand is what does the Hebrew text actually say, and that you can then do your homework and enjoy yourself in that research. And so right now, I want to take you very quickly to a background on King Uzziah in 2 Chronicles chapter 26. We have here 2 Chronicles chapter 26. And this is the background for Isaiah chapter 6. You may be wondering, why are we in 2 Chronicles chapter 26? So let me just refer it here, 2 Chronicles. And we are in chapter 26. And we are going to do a very quick pass on Uzziah's background and why we are at this stage and why Isaiah chapter 6 is happening. The people of Yehuda, Judah, made Uzziah king when he was 16 years old. Instead of his father Amaziah, he built Elat and restored it to Judah after the king rested with his fathers. Now, those of you who have been to Israel, when you come through the Sinai Peninsula at the Taba crossing at the south, when you cross into Israel, you arrive at Eilat, right? That is a port town. Uzziah was 16, and he became king, reigned 52 years in Jerusalem. He is one of the longest serving king. All right. So what is important is this. I want to now scroll down. In the entire story of Uzziah, you find that he always sought God. You can see here, right? He sought God. And it's important for us then to realize things like this is to give us a clue that Uzziah is very, very interested in God's work and his plans. And he was very successful in his campaigns. And then he became so successful that he decided in verse 16 that one of those years that he came back highly successful, he became strong in his heart and was lifted up. When he was strong means he was very powerful. He was very successful. His heart was lifted up. Pride. And this is his single moment of problem, I would say, in his relationship with God. He became so successful that he thought he can do anything. And so what happened was he transgressed against the Lord. And the transgressions here actually speak of Pesha. He rebelled against God. He did something that was really offensive to God. And what was this? It was not about a sacrifice. He actually did this. He entered the temple of the Lord to burn incense on the altar of incense. And this would be in the holy place, or called the sanctuary. Now, we need to be very clear. Number one, the king is from the tribe of Judah. Those who are serving in the temple is from the tribe of Levi, the Levites. And the sons of Aaron would be the priests. And the one who is the high priest is elected among the priests. And so Azariah, the high priest, went after him. And there were 80 priests of the Lord, valiant men. They were very strong, they were very able. And they were preventing King Uzziah from doing what? Burning incense. Because that does not belong to the king. Doesn't matter how powerful the king is. But the king came to a point in time where he thought he could do anything. He probably thought that he was invincible. And they said to him, "It is not for you, Uzziah, to burn incense to the Lord, but for the priests, the sons of Aaron, who are consecrated." You know what is consecrated? Set apart. To be holy. And they are the ones to burn incense. Please get out of the sanctuary, which is the holy place, where the table of incense is and the altar of incense is. For you have trespassed. You have crossed the line. You have really gone against God. You will have no honor from the Lord. Doesn't matter how much you have done in victory in the wars, but when you do this, everything goes out the window. I am trying to help us understand why Isaiah 6 happened. Then Uzziah became furious. Why? He is the king. Everyone in Israel must listen to him. And he took the censer in his hand to burn incense. While he was getting angry with the priest who was trying to hold him back, leprosy broke out on his forehead. And it happened before the priest in the house of the Lord, beside the incense altar, while he was attempting to burn incense. Verse 20, Azariah, the chief priest, and all the priests looked at him. And you know what they did? They were like, they were shocked. And there on his forehead was leprosy. And they thrust him out of the place. You know what it means to thrust? It was to eject him out of the place. Indeed, also hurried to get out because the Lord had struck him. And he was a leper until the day of his death. He dwelt in an isolated house because he was a leper. And observe these words. He was cut off from the house of the Lord. And so let me just explain what we have just read. Number one, Uzziah is Judah, and he was king. Judah does not do the work of the Levi. The priest is Levi, right? That's number two. And so Uzziah became angry with the priest to do something that he must never do in his life. But he thought he was king. He was so successful. God was with him. And so God struck him with leprosy. Now, we don't see leprosy very much nowadays. I don't think it was very prevalent, but it happened. And it broke out on his forehead. What does it mean when it's on his forehead? It can be seen. It is very obvious. Sudden outbreak of leprosy reminds us of who? Moses, right? In the book of Exodus. It reminds us of Miriam. Book of Exodus, she was taught a lesson by God. And so in this case, he was taught a lesson by God, but this was a lifelong lesson. His leprosy was there until the day of his death. Now, what does leprosy mean at this point in time? This is God's way of telling Uzziah, I don't want you here. I don't want you here. And so they have to get out of the place. Why? Because leprosy means you are unclean. Unclean. When you are unclean, you are not supposed to be in the temple of God. And so leprosy must be dealt with until the person has been redeemed or the person has been cured or restored. Now, the story is he was a leper until the day of his death, and he was cut off from the house of the Lord, that he can never enter again. And the word cut off literally means executed, removed, terminated of his privileges. The next thing I want to point out to you, which is relevant to Isaiah 6, is this. He was a leper. Leprosy is one of the few events, I would say, that represents death. Leprosy means you cannot be with the people. You must be outside the camp. And so they made him a house among the dead. So the house was amongst the grave, right? The cemetery. And that was the house he lived until the day he died. And more importantly was this. He was cut off. He was considered dead. The day he became a leper, he was cut off. And hence, a leper is someone who is considered dead, maybe a walking dead. The second class of people who consider themselves dead would be women who cannot give birth, and they consider themselves dead. The third class of people that they consider dead are the utmost humiliated poor, that they are on the ground. And that is why God wants the people of Israel to take care of those who cannot take care of themselves. Now let's get back to Isaiah chapter 6. In Isaiah chapter 6, I needed to do that background so that we understand it's in the period of King Uzziah, and he died. And the suggestion is this. It would be when he was struck with leprosy. And that is what is commonly understood as died. It wasn't the time where he was physically dead, but he was virtually dead or religiously dead. So he cannot enter the city, the camp, nor the temple. This was the time when that is Isaiah saw the Lord, Adonai. This word is Adonai. It's not Jehovah. He saw Adonai. He was seated on a throne, on a chair, basically. And this would be a throne. He was there on a throne. The picture is this. Inside the temple would be the Holy of Holies. The Holy of Holies will have the Ark of the Covenant, right? Ark of the Covenant. And on top of the Ark of the Covenant would be, well, let me attempt to draw. Would be two angels or two cherubims, and they had wings, right? That supposed to touch each other. And I would suggest to you that if you're not familiar, that this part on top is called the mercy seat. And that would be the throne of God. Okay? And inside the ark would be things that we know. And this is where Isaiah, somehow he saw. Now the word see here is ra'ah. He actually saw something. And in that something he saw, I don't think he actually physically saw God, but he saw someone that looked like God in a blur where it's not like a face-to-face meeting, but he saw this vision, right? I would call it a vision because it's not God literally sitting there. So God was sitting on a throne, and the throne was not this throne. It wasn't the ark. And so what we can see is God was high and lifted up. The word high is ram. It comes from room. And we normally have an English word be lofty. That's not a very good way of imagining this. You could see that if we have the Hashamayim, and then we have the Arets. These are two places where this high is spoken about. And the intent is to show us that in heaven, on earth, right? In heaven and on earth. And so there is an earthly temple with the ark, and God is, well, short of a better way, I apologize for the artwork. We are talking about high, and this is high from here to here. So we could see God in that framework, stretched out into the heavens, that is, he was seated on his throne, which is here, seated on his throne up in the heavens. Okay, the throne. And then there is another throne here, obviously, which is the Ark of the Covenant, right? And that is why the Jews think that there is a temple up there in the heavens and one temple down in the ground. But never mind that aside. So Isaiah is looking at this vision, and God is seated on his throne up there in the heavens, and he was lifted up. And the idea of lifted up is natsah. He was lifted up there, seated on the high side. Okay, just follow my explanation first. And then his, well, it says here his train, right? His train of his robe. That would be a good way of translating it, by the way. The train of his robe. So his robe essentially flowed down. Now the idea is this. This is the train of his robe. All right. In the English language, that would be the hem of his robe. And this would be the hem of his robe. And so his hem filled the temple. Obviously, you're given a very supernatural imagery that Isaiah is inside the temple. He looked up and he saw God seated up on his throne, and his hem of his robe that is so long that it flowed all the way down from heaven to earth is covering the temple. That is the picture in verse 1. Verse 2, above it stood seraphim. The word seraphim is important. Seraphim is what we call fiery. Right? It's a fiery serpent or angel. And so if you remember in Numbers chapter 21, where Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, that the narrative told us that fiery serpents were sent by God to bite them and they died. That's the same word, seraphim. And in this case, we are told they are angels. They are seraphim. It's plural. Seraph is the singular. Seraphim is the plural. And we are seeing this imagery that each one of them had 6 wings, 2 for the face he covered, 2 for the feet he covered, and 2 he flew. Now this imagery is this. You mean that angels have wings to fly? And of course we have little pictures of cupids, but that's not the picture here. The word fly means they are moving very rapidly, right? They had wings to cover, and these 2 wings that he covered his face is that he doesn't want to see God's face, the Shekinah, right? And 2 covered his feet, that he is not exposing himself to the Holy One. And 2, he flew. And there is a view that says that these 2 wings that he served. And so the idea here is we have seraphim shooting all over the place. That's the picture we are getting. And one of them cried to each other. So they're crying out to each other, Kadosh, 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 holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. That's Yehovah Tsevaot. And who are the hosts? The angels. God is the captain, the chief, the general of his army. And so it's Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. The whole earth is full of his glory. And the idea here is about things that will lift up God, things that will make people see how incredible God is. Now, if you look at this, holy, holy, holy. And I tried to explain to us yesterday that the word holy, kadosh, literally means different, set apart, right? Special. That's the generic meaning for holy. So when God is holy, it means that God is different. There is none like him. How he do things, where he is, what he says, that's holy. He's unique. He is set apart from any other gods in the world. Not that they are real, but men on earth worship other gods. So he says, you shall not have any other gods before me. He is special. And now he is showing himself. And they call this a theophany. That Isaiah actually sees something about God. And this would be his Shekinah glory. The whole earth is shining about God himself. Verse 4. Now, I guess the emotions that Isaiah would have at this point in time, I guess he would be shaking fits, right? Short of another word to say, he would be absolutely terrified, right? Absolutely terrified. Now, the posts of the door of the temple were shaken by the voice of him who cried out, and the house was filled with smoke. Now, the imagery is this, the post of the door. Now, if you remember, now I'm not sure whether you remember, but you need to understand that the temple looked something like this. And then there is a middle part, and then there is a front part. The door itself is here, right? That's the door. The door is approximately 5 cubits by 5 by I guess it would be 8 cubits. 5 cubits is the doorpost. I think that would be enough for us to think about, because each door would be 5 cubits by about 3 cubits, right? 5 cubits is approximately, how big would that be? About 8 to 9 feet. 8 to 9 feet. And that's the doorpost. And it's holding a door just as big, if not bigger. And you need to imagine, this would be bigger than anybody's door. It would be like the palace door. Because remember, the temple is actually the palace of God, right? And so you find that it would be close to about 8 to 9 feet, depending on the cubit you use. But I want to point out to you that this door was really huge, very firm, and for it to be shaken. Now, the word shaken here is quiver, right? It is like an earthquake. Now, in the book of Amos, we talked about the earthquake at the time of Uzziah, and so would Zechariah. And so this was the earthquake that happened. In fact, this earthquake happens like an explosion right across, and it was a massive one. And it was so massive that it gave out smoke. Things were falling all over the place. And I'm sure the censer was just that. And that was the time when King Uzziah was struck with leprosy. And that would be the idea, right? That would be the idea. And so the intent that I wanted to show you is that the emotions, the vibrations, the shaking, and it says by the voice of him, it would be loud, earthquake, thundering voice, with the shaking brought down the whole building. The things fell down. I'm sure the censer would have fallen down. The smoke was all over the place, and that was what it says. So you can't really see clearly now. In verse 5, and so I said, Isaiah, I said, and you remember this word, right? In verse 5. Hoi, alamak, right? Or ayo, is me. So I guess the word hoi in Hebrew is much worse than our ayah, right? In its expression. So hoi, for I am undone. The word undone right here means that he is Dhamma, like Adama, right? Adam or Dhamma. This is to perish. It is to be cut off, right? It is to cease. These are the words. So it is not undone in that sense, but I am undone in the sense that he doesn't know what to do. He's so scared, and he is absolutely stunned, and thereby silent. Right? That's what he is expressing himself. Because, and the word because, that the reason being that I'm this way is because really he has seen God, right? He has seen God. And in the Hebrew context, no man can see God and live. And so each time people say, oh, I've seen God, I'm surely going to die. It's not that they have seen God in the flesh, or so to speak, with their naked eyes. They have seen the very presence of God, right? And so people will be very afraid. He says, I am a man of unclean lips. Unclean lips is tameh, so he's impure. He is religiously unclean. So the idea of undone comes from the idea of Uzziah in leprosy. And he's impure because he's now speaking about these things. His lips is impure. He is not considering himself to be clean. For I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. And so he is telling God that, the people that he lives with, the ones who in Judah, are also just like him. And why is he so scared? For my eyes have seen. You remember in Hebrew, I've kept explaining to you, everything is very concrete. And so it is that Isaiah literally by his eyes have actually seen who? The King, the Lord of hosts. And so in his mind, the King is on the throne. That's God. God is on the throne. And his train of the robe all the way comes down to the lower temple. And the hem actually is there on the ground. Yehovah Tzavaot. So he said that I have seen, so I'm going to die. I'm going to die. And that was what he said. Now, verse 6, he says this, verse 6. One then means after he has said all this, right? After Isaiah had said all this, he said, one of the seraphim, one of them, there are many of them darting all over the place. That's what it means by flying. He darted to me, having in his hand. So where did he have his hand? And we always said, he had 6 wings. Never said anything about his hands. And so these are all the picture, because I would say that Isaiah is trying to explain what is the color red to a blind man. We are the blind man. And Isaiah is trying to explain this because we never saw this. And so Isaiah is trying to say, this seraphim, he's darted very quickly to me, and in his hand he had a live coal, which he had taken with the tongs from the altar. The altar is in the courtyard, right? That's outside the temple structure. The temple, the altar and the basin is outside. And so what we have is a seraphim from the inside of the building. He went to the altar. And so what did he do? He darted out and he came back with a live coal. Live coal means it's not on fire, but it means that it's a piece of coal and it is still simmering on the outside, right? It is still simmering on the outside. And so that would be the picture of the coal that they brought back, okay? And he was using tongs. Why would an angel be afraid of the fire? Actually, it wasn't so much for the angel. It was more for Isaiah, because the live coal wasn't burning and the seraphim is burning, right? The seraphim is fiery. He is on fire, literally. And so if he touched the coal, it would catch fire again, and you won't be able to touch the lips of Isaiah. And with this, he stretched out his hand and he touched my mouth. This is interesting because the word here is safar, and it would be lips, right? In the dual, we have 2 lips, right? Upper and lower lip. And it is not mouth. I'm sorry, right? It cannot be mouth. And he touched his lips, meaning the seraphim didn't stuff the live coal into the mouth of Isaiah. He lightly touched. Now, the word touch is naga. Now, I need to explain this a little bit. It is to touch, to strike, right? To reach, to inflict a plague. These are all the meanings of this word touch. And so the picture I think we can see here would be that this angel, the Seraphim, took the tongs with the live coal and he reached out and gently touched the mouth of Isaiah. That's what it means. And the Seraphim said, "Behold, Hina, behold, this has touched your lips." This is mouth. That is correct. "And largely touch my mouth and now touch his lips." So basically, touch mouth and touch lips is the same thing, right? So it's not striking his mouth, but really reaching out and touching it. And by doing that, this is what the Seraphim explained. Your iniquity is turned away. This is avon. And your sin, hatat, is purged. What does this mean? Take away and purge. First, take away. Take away is to remove, is to turn aside. So basically, the Seraphim is saying your avon is removed. Your sin, your hatat, is purged. Now, this really is covered, right? Or a more common word we have always used is atone. And so this is describing to Isaiah. You know what? By doing this, Isaiah, we have cleared this. And this is an A and a B, right? Your iniquity is removed. Your sin is covered, atoned. And by this, you are clean again. That's the picture here, right? That's the picture here. Verse 8. Also, now this word also is not quite correct. It should be and then. Meaning, after verse 7 and the episode of verse 7, verse 8 takes place. I heard the voice of Adonai saying, "Whom shall I send?" The word send is shalak, right? Shalak. And who will go for us? Literally, walk for us. And so this is also an A and a B. Who is going to represent the Lord? Okay. Now, why is this the same? Send is shalak, to send someone to represent you on your behalf. And so this is the sending part, and sending part requires the person to walk for us. The one who walks for another, one who walks for another. We have a word, and the Hebrew word is malak. The English word is messenger. Also, angel. And we also see it from a viewpoint of prophet. That thus says the Lord. God tells me and I speak it out. That would be walking for us. Who is going to speak for us? Who is going to represent us? Who shall I send? And that would be the question. Then, after God said that, then Isaiah said, here I am, send me. And that is the beginning of Isaiah the prophet. So the whole thing is a very intense and incredible vision, seeing God, and he really, I guess in our colloquial way, tak boleh tahan, right? He cannot stand up to God, and he admits that he's no good, right? That's humility. He admits and he confesses that Seraphim took the live coal with tongs, touched his lips, and said, "You are now clean. You're now atoned. You're now covered," right? And then God said, "Go, tell this people. Go and say something." What is this? Go and say. Go means walk. So if you want to say, who is walking for us? Isaiah said, "Here I am, shalak me." And then God says, "Walk. Go and say to this people." Who is this people? God's people, right? Judah. And at this point in time, you must remember Israel is still around. Why? Because it is at the time of King Uzziah. King Uzziah is the king of Judah, and in Israel, there is still a king. And so both kingdoms are still around. Go tell this people. And it says, they keep on hearing, but they do not understand. They keep on seeing, but they do not perceive. This is another A and a B. Why is this important? Number one, Shema, Ra'ah. To hear literally means, in general, to pick up the sounds, and you need to understand what you are hearing so that you can act on it. But these people, they are hearing the sounds. They are looking at the vision, what they see, but they do not understand. They don't recognize what they hear. They don't recognize what they see. And so this is an A and a B because they are now dysfunctional. They are evil, right? Dysfunctional means evil. What does evil mean? Evil means that whatever God has intended, it's not happening. And so it's dysfunctional. And so in their actions here, God is completely outrageous. And so God is saying, I am going to punish them. I am going to discipline them. He says this, the heart of this people, make the heart of this people dull. Actually, the idea is not make the heart, okay? The idea of this word is right here, is make dull, right? Make dull the heart of this people. The English in the King James is a bit archaic. And the meaning of make dull is to make fat. Make fat. Cause it to be fat. And so in the concrete mind of the Hebrew, fat heart. Well, right now we have fatty liver. This is a fatty heart. And so in the Hebrew, a fat heart means a dull heart. Something that is hard to perceive. Hard to understand. Hard to figure things out. So make their heart dull. Make their ears, right here, ears heavy. The word heavy is kavod. Kavod is the same word that is glory, honor. And so make their ears heavy doesn't mean make their ears of honor. It means make their ears heavy so that it is hard to hear. You can't pick up the signals. Shut their eyes. The word shut their eyes literally means, how do we say, to blind them, to smear something, to smear something over their eyes so that they can't see. All right? And so God says, in case they see with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their heart. Now, this is, remember, A, B, C. One of the rare occasions where 3 lines are saying the same thing, lest they were to perceive the functional, the good. Why is God trying to make the people dull? God is trying to make the people dull because they have come to a point after so many years that whatever the priests read in the temple, they hear but they don't do. They say, they read the 10 commandments, you shall have no other gods before me. And they hear that and they have an idol, a golden calf, right? They can worship other gods. And so God is, in this case, I think you can say, God is tired of them. And so, what can you expect when God is tired of them? Stringent punishment. God doesn't want them to do what? Because if you perceive, see with your eyes, hear with your ears, and understand with your hearts, they will return and be healed. Healed of this malady. Return is shuv. This is important. What is shuv? Shuv is to return back to where you were. And so where they were in the good old days with David and Solomon, that was great. And so they should return back to that state, but they are not. So all the way from Rehoboam now to Uzziah, people have been pretending to be religious. And so if they return, they will be healed. Now, healed is not with regards to illness healed. That would be healed with their relationship with God. It would be restored, that they will be right with God once again. Now, in verse 11, Isaiah said, how long, O Lord? How long what? How long does he have to wait? How long before all these happen? When will your punishment, right? When will your punishment happen? And so God answered, well, your job is to do this. Do this until, right? Until the cities are laid waste without inhabitant. The houses are without a man. The land is utterly desolate. The Lord has removed men far away, and the forsaken places are many in the midst of the land. Remember, forsaken places are the high places where they worship Baal, they worship the golden calf, they worship all kinds, right? And God will remove them, and this means there will be exile, right? Captivity. And here will be destruction. And God is saying, if you're not going to remove your high places and destroy them, I'll find somebody else to do that. And so this is the time that Isaiah have to do that. When do you think this happened? Well, the first one happened with the Assyrians. And the second one happened later at the time of Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonians. And so the first portion here is, until all this is done, this would be the northern kingdom has been kicked away. And so that would be number one. When would that be? Well, from Uzziah, it will go all the way to Hezekiah. And that's how long the ministry of prophethood of Isaiah took place. Is everything so bleak? God says, yet a tenth will be in it. And he will return and be for consuming, as a terebinth tree, as an oak whose stump remains when it is cut down. So the holy seed shall be its stump. So God is saying that there will be a remnant. A tenth is like a remnant, a small portion. They will return back to the homeland. They will be like a great big tree, an oak tree, big tree. And these are big, very big trees, right? You have an A and a B here. Whose stump remains when it is cut down. Like when Israel is cut down, there will still be a stump. And the holy seed will be its stump. So the remnant is important in the eyes of God. The remnant is the holy seed, and it will be the stump. And so even when the punishment comes, there will be someone left. The faithful will remain. And with this, we end Isaiah chapter 6.